Two gunshots echoed through the basement of a private home in Ellington just 2 days before Christmas. 39-year-old Connie DeBates was found dead, one shot to the back of her head, one shot to her stomach. Her husband, 40-year-old Richard DeBates, was lying nearby, tied to a chair. He was covered in blood, bleeding. He told police there had been a break-in. A masked man, armed, a knife, demanding money. Then the guy ran off. The alarm system, a short call to 911, sirens cutting through the silence on Birchview Drive. Richard's version sounded clear at first, calm, structured. At 8 o'clock, he said he drove the kids to school. He got back home around 8:45, walked in and found a stranger. At 9:05, he claimed he heard the gunshots. The problem? The digital trail painted a completely different picture. At 8:26, he was logging into Facebook from the home computer at the exact time he was supposedly heading to work. At 8:47, someone tried to disarm the security system. At 9:04, an email was sent to his supervisor from the home IP address saying he had pulled over on the side of the road. Connie's Fitbit recorded activity after the time Richard said she was already dead. At 9:23, movement when the garage door opened. From 9:40 to 9:46, activity on Facebook. At 10:05, her last recorded movement. The 911 call didn't come in until about 10:30, more than an hour after the time he described as the moment of the murder. There were no signs of forced entry. The wallet that was supposedly stolen was found in the yard with everything still inside. No fingerprints on the rifle. His knife wounds, superficial. The first police canine kept trying to return to Richard while he was inside the ambulance. The day after the murder, he hired a lawyer. A week later, he filed a claim for $475,000 in life insurance, and he withdrew $93,000 from an investment account that had been in Connie's name. Months earlier, Connie had created a note on her phone titled, "Why I Want a Divorce." She wrote about lies, about debt, about feeling ignored. Meanwhile, Richard was having an affair with a woman named Sarah. She was pregnant, 8 weeks away from giving birth. 2 days before the murder, he texted Sarah that he was leaving his wife. The next day, he told her he loved her. His browser history included searches like deadly combinations of over-the-counter drugs, untraceable homemade poison, tasteless poison. And his story, it kept shifting. First he said he heard the shots, then he said he saw them, then he claimed he didn't hear or see anything at all. At one point he insisted the attacker was still inside the house. Later he said he watched him run away. Digital time stamps, the home security system, IP addresses, a Fitbit, gaps in the timeline. Not a single piece of his story lined up with the technical data, not one. This is a case where instead of fingerprints, you got server logs. Instead of witnesses, there's an activity tracker. Instead of a masked intruder, there's the one person who controlled every entry into his own house. And the real question isn't who walked into that home. It's who never actually walked out. So, yeah, to understand how this all unraveled, we need to go back a little. Hey guys, let me grab you for just a second. I'm really curious where my audience is watching from, so I'd love for you to drop a comment and tell me what city you're in and what time it is for you right now. Thanks for taking a moment. Go ahead and share that in the comments, and now let's keep going. Ellington, Connecticut. It's a small, quiet town in Tolland County with that classic New England vibe. Colonial-style houses, rolling green hills, open skies. It's the kind of place where you can slow down, take a walk, and just breathe. No crazy crowds. Just history, countryside charm, and that calm small town rhythm. By the way, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments. I'm always curious to see where my audience is tuning in from. And this is exactly where 39-year-old Connie Margot Debates lived. She shared her home with her husband, 40-year-old Richard, and their 2 sons. Richard Jr., everyone called him RJ, who was 9 years old, and 6-year-old Connor. Connie was originally from Rockville. She grew up in a big, loud, close-knit family. Summers were busy, holidays were even busier, and someone was always stopping by. As she got older, she didn't drift away from that energy, she embraced it. She loved hosting. She really loved it. Parties, family gatherings, game nights. If there was an excuse to bring people together, she'd find it. Christmas, New Year's, Halloween, there wasn't a single stretch of the year when she didn't have something planned. Decorations, food, themed games, you name it. She just wanted everyone under one roof, laughing and eating and having a good time. You know how after high school or college, people slowly fade out of each other's lives? That just wasn't Connie. She refused to let that happen. She organized class reunions, kept group chats alive, reached out first. She made sure people stayed connected. Her friends described her as full of energy, always upbeat, the kind of person who would answer a call at midnight if you were struggling. She gave advice freely and showed up when it mattered, even if she was busy, even if she had a million things going on. One summer, at a party, she met Richard Debates. He was a computer technician. At first glance, some people said they wouldn't have necessarily paired them together, but somehow, it worked. The more their friends got to know Richard, the more they saw his goofy side. He was described as a big kid, the guy who wanted to make the whole room laugh. And Connie, she had that same playful spark. Eventually, Richard invited her to meet his parents. And his mother later said she knew right away Connie was special. Like there was just something about her. On the 4th of July, 2003, the couple got married and settled into a beautiful home at number 7 Birchview Drive on a quiet suburban street. It looked like the kind of place where nothing bad could ever happen. Calm, peaceful, safe. When RJ and Connor came along, Connie's already famous parties somehow got even bigger and honestly more creative. She wanted the funniest decorations, the coolest props, the most incredible costumes, not for show, not for social media, just to see that look on her boys' faces. At one Easter party, she told the kids that if they scattered jelly beans all over the yard and went to bed, they'd wake up to find that every single one had magically turned into lollipops. And yeah, she meant it. After the kids fell asleep, Connie went outside in the dark, gathered up every jelly bean, and replaced them with lollipops so the boys could find them in the morning. Imagine that out there in the middle of the night, quietly making magic happen. That was Connie. She was the kind of person who always did more than anyone expected. She put her whole heart into everything. She just loved making people smile. 2 days before Christmas, the house Connie and Richard shared was already decorated. Lights up, tree glowing, presents wrapped and stacked. No exaggeration, Connie was really looking forward to the next few days with her boys. That morning, she helped get the kids ready for school. Richard drove them, then he came back home to change into his work clothes. Connie was planning to head out to a spin class herself. Just a normal December morning, routine, quiet. Then, just before 11 in the morning, something shifted. Neighbors along peaceful Birchview Drive suddenly rushed to their windows and front doors. All they could hear were sirens, one after another, police cars speeding straight toward the Debates house. Officers responded after the home alarm was triggered, along with a brief call to 911.
911. Hello?
Rumors started spreading fast. There had been a home invasion at number 7 Birchview Drive. A masked man had attacked Connie and Richard, and now he was on the run. Police went door to door, checking every house in the neighborhood, making sure the suspect wasn't hiding inside. Officers instructed residents to gather their families into one room and stay there until they were told it was safe, no movement, no stepping outside. People were literally sheltering in place, waiting for word. But then the details that came out were even worse. Richard was found tied to a chair, covered in blood. He was lying on the floor, the chair knocked over on top of him. Thankfully, paramedics rushed him to the hospital. His condition was unstable. Connie was found in the basement of their home, shot. One bullet to the back of her head, one to her stomach. Detectives soon determined the intruder was no longer inside, and residents were allowed to leave their homes. As neighbors stepped outside, they were met with yellow police tape stretching across lawns, flashing lights reflecting off windows, uniformed officers everywhere. It didn't feel real. It looked like something out of a dark crime series on TV. After Richard received medical treatment, nurses allowed detectives to question him. He was shaken, in shock, but he gave them his account of that morning. He said that at 8 o'clock he left the house to drive the kids to school. Around 8:30 he came back home to change his work shirt. He saw Connie changing into workout clothes and pulling out of the driveway. She was heading to a spin class at the local YMCA. But the class was canceled, so she turned around and came back home. Richard said his commute to work normally took about 40 minutes. About 10 minutes into the drive, he realized he had forgotten his laptop and turned around. Around that same time, he received an alert on his phone. The home alarm had been triggered by something or someone inside the house. He emailed his supervisor from his phone, saying he'd be late because he needed to make sure everything was okay at home. He claimed he returned between 8:45 and 9 o'clock. When he walked in, he heard noise upstairs. He quietly went up the stairs and saw a tall man dressed in camouflage and a mask going through Connie's jewelry. The intruder noticed him, raised a knife, and demanded money, credit cards, PIN numbers. Richard said he handed over his wallet. The attacker's face was completely covered, but he was tall, around 6'2", according to Richard's solid build, deep voice. He compared him to Vin Diesel. And then, he said, everything became blurry. Events unfolded too fast. He heard Connie returning home, and he yelled for her to run.
So I yelled to her to get out of the house. My wife didn't run. She must have ran into the basement because we have 2 guns in the house. One was in the basement in a lockbox, and one's in our closet. She ran downstairs.
Instead of running out of the house, Connie went down to the basement. Richard later said he thought she was trying to grab a gun to protect them. The masked man chased after her downstairs, and at 9:05 he heard 2 gunshots. He said he ran down right after that. According to him, he saw his wife lying on the floor, dead, and the masked man was standing there holding one of their rifles. Then, he claimed, the attacker turned on him. He slashed at Richard's legs with a utility knife, tied him to a chair with plastic zip ties, and burned him with a blowtorch. That's the version he gave. And on the surface, it sounded horrifying.
I'm sitting in the chair, I was kind of half tied up, in shock, I guess.
What do you mean half tied up?
I had one leg free and an arm free. He tied one leg, tied one arm, and he tied my neck fairly tight with a tie wrap. And I got torch to kind of just blow in his mask a little bit, and it caught on fire. He dropped a blowtorch. I was starting to scream for help. I couldn't hear a soul. I got really, really dizzy.
Richard later said he managed to grab the blowtorch and burn the attacker's face. After that, he claimed, the man panicked and ran out of the house. Even though he was tied to a chair, Richard said he dragged himself up the stairs to the kitchen and hit the panic button connected to their home alarm system. Then he made a short call to 911. The story was so intense, so disturbing, that detectives didn't even know where to begin at first. They started interviewing neighbors, friends, anyone close to Connie and Richard. Some friends mentioned that a few months before the tragedy, the couple had issues with a contractor. They weren't happy with the work done on their home and had even filed a civil lawsuit against him for several $1,000s. Not long after that, their car windshield was smashed. Connie was convinced it was the same guy. She told friends she was scared. so scared that even though she was afraid of guns, they were considering getting one for protection. Richard bought a rifle and kept it in the basement. Ballistics later confirmed that was the weapon used to kill Connie. Police tracked down the contractor. His name was Ken. He admitted things had ended badly between them. He was upset about losing money in the lawsuit. But, according to him, that chapter was over. He had moved on. Sure, the timing looked suspicious, but did that make him a killer? Investigators didn't think so. Ken cooperated fully. He agreed to be photographed, allowed officers to search his home and examine his electronic devices. He had no criminal record. His height, his build, even his voice didn't match Richard's description. And considering he had been inside their house before, Richard probably would have recognized him even behind a mask. Ken's alibi checked out, solid. He was cleared as a suspect. The week after Christmas, while most people were preparing to ring in New Year's, Connie's family, friends, and the entire Ellington community were preparing to say goodbye. No one was surprised by the turnout. Despite the freezing weather, hundreds of people lined up outside to pay their respects. The wait stretched for hours. After standing in line for 3 hours to speak with Richard at the funeral, Connie's two best friends finally reached him. They had known her for 20 years. They had been in that house countless times. They had spent more evenings than they could count with both Connie and Richard. And when they finally stood in front of him, they were shocked. "And how did you know my wife?" he asked them, staring straight through them with this blank, almost distant look in his eyes. They just stood there, completely thrown off. Eventually, they brushed it off. Stress, shock, trauma, that's what they told themselves, and they moved on. But later, they glanced at each other and quietly said the same thing. That was strange. There wasn't a single visible mark on him. No bruises, no scratches, nothing you'd expect after something that violent. And at Connie's funeral, something else stood out. To the surprise of her friends, Richard left early, like really early, before most of the close family, before the crowd had even thinned out. It didn't sit right.
You'd think that they would have any sort of lead by this point, right?
2 weeks and still no arrest in the murder of a young Ellington mother. 39-year-old Connie DeBate was found dead just before Christmas.
Police responded to her Birchview Drive home after the house alarm was activated. They found her husband, Richard DeBate, injured inside the smoky home. Police later found Connie with gunshot wounds to the head and stomach. Her death ruled a homicide, but police have yet to make an arrest, and they've said there is no threat to the public. Still, the entire situation putting residents around town on edge.
Understandably, Fox 61's Katie Corrado went to Ellington today to get some answers. She joins us now with the very latest. Katie?
Audrey and Brent, this murder happened on December 23rd, and people in town tell me the more time passes without answers, the more the rumor mill seems to churn.
And these guys are like family. You know, these ladies have been coming in forever.
Luann Lanzieri hears a lot of the Ellington town chatter inside her nail salon on West Road.
And there's a lot of rumors going around.
Rumors about the murder of Ellington mom Connie DeBate. And 2 weeks since the crime, there's still been no arrest.
It seems like every day someone's coming in and asking, have you heard anything else? You know, this is what we heard.
Luann says most people are confident the police will find whoever killed her childhood friend.
I grew up with her in Vernon as well when she was little. And she was always a wonderful person, so I hope they find the correct person that did this to her.
The other neighbors we talked to did not want to go on camera, but say it is scary and nerve-wracking to know there has not been an arrest. They say this is what everyone around town is talking about, and they just want an answer. But answers so far are scarce.
The detectives are working very hard. They're waiting for a lot of evidence to come back from the labs. They want all their ducks in a row before they can make a decision of what's going on.
Ellington First Selectman Lori Spielman says she's in touch with police nearly every day and has been told this was an isolated incident.
Any idea when something might be coming?
I don't know, maybe next week, but they are still waiting for some of the evidence to come back from the labs.
We reached out to state police tonight for an update on the investigation, but have not heard back. We also tried contacting Connie's husband, Rick DeBate, but he has not responded.
In the days that followed, witnesses said Richard seemed surprisingly upbeat. He was going out to dinners, showing up at bars, hosting gatherings at his house, laughing, cracking jokes, acting like life was just moving along. People started whispering. If you didn't know who he was, they said, you'd never guess his wife had just been murdered, that he had supposedly survived a brutal attack himself. Then Richard posted on Facebook. He wrote that he was staying strong for his boys, that he was grateful for everyone's support, that he was holding it together for his family. On the surface, it sounded like something any grieving husband might say, but for some people, it just didn't match what they were seeing in real life. Grief is complicated, deeply personal. There's no single script for how someone is supposed to act after losing a loved one. No rule book, no right reaction. People process pain in completely different ways. But pretty soon, people in town weren't just talking about the crime, they were talking about Richard, about how off he seemed. Something didn't add up. Friends felt it, family felt it, even detectives felt that quiet, uneasy tension building around his story. Back at the house on Birchview Drive, the investigation moved slowly. None of the neighbors had seen or heard anything. And given the distance between the homes, officers admitted that wasn't entirely surprising. There were no clear signs of forced entry. A basement window was slightly open. Maybe that's how the killer got in, or maybe not. Nothing valuable was missing. Nothing was seriously ransacked. Canine units couldn't track a clear scent through the house. In fact, the first police dog that arrived kept trying to pull back toward Richard while he was inside the ambulance. 2 other dogs failed to pick up any trail of a suspect supposedly fleeing the area. The wallet Richard claimed had been taken was found outside, and it appeared to still contain everything. The rifle had no fingerprints on it, not from an intruder, not from Connie, not even from Richard. Richard did have knife wounds, but nurses described them as superficial, surface level. And the more he talked to investigators, the more his account shifted. At first, he was confident in the details, clear, specific. Then it turned into, I don't know. First he said he heard the shots that killed Connie. Then he said he saw it happen. Later, he claimed he neither saw nor heard anything. To the first responding officers, he said the killer was still inside the house, walking around. To other detectives, he said he saw the man leave. He insisted everything began just before 9 in the morning and that Connie was shot about 5 minutes later. But the call to 911 wasn't made until around 10:30. The very next day after Connie's murder, the day before Christmas Eve, Richard hired a lawyer. A week later, he filed a life insurance claim for $475,000. He also withdrew $93,000 from an investment account in Connie's name. And slowly, it became clear their marriage may not have been as perfect as everyone thought. Behind closed doors, a lot was happening. In December of 2014, Connie started a note on her iPhone titled, "Why I Want a Divorce." In it, she wrote about Richard's irresponsible handling of money. She called him an unfit father. She said she wasn't getting attention from him. No affection, no tenderness. This wasn't just frustration written in the heat of the moment. It read like someone who had been thinking about it for a long time. She wrote, "He takes money from multiple accounts that aren't even his, says he's sorry but never actually takes responsibility. I don't know anything about his day, who he talks to, what's going on in his life outside of work. I'm tired of covering for him. Tired of lying and pretending everything is great when it's not." Then she created another section, Reasons to Stay. And that part felt different. Softer. People like him when he's in a good mood, he's fun to be around. I still find him attractive, and when I'm with him, I feel like myself. So what could Richard's motive have been? Law enforcement wasn't sharing everything publicly, but internally, they already had one possible motive, and it surfaced during Richard's very first interview at the hospital. It turned out Richard was having an affair with a woman named Sarah. He had known her since high school. Connie knew her too. In fact, Sarah had even given a speech at Richard and Connie's wedding. Their relationship had been on and off for years, but starting in May of 2015, they began seeing each other more frequently. Just 1 month later, Sarah found out she was pregnant. And allegedly, she asked him to leave Connie. During that initial 7-hour interview at the hospital, Richard brought up Sarah himself. He admitted they had been sexually involved, but he framed it differently. According to him, Sarah wanted a child of her own. She couldn't afford the process on her own, and she approached the couple asking if Richard could donate sperm so she could have a baby. That's how he explained it.
We were going to donate sperm to her to have a kid.
He went on to say that because the medical procedure was too expensive, they decided to handle it, in his words, the traditional way.
Untraditional, but traditional in the way that the baby was conceived?
Yeah.
Okay.
Detectives paused and asked him directly, "So Connie knew you were trying to get Sarah pregnant?" "Yes," he answered without hesitation. Not only did she know, it was actually her idea.
Do you think your wife had any issues with that?
It was her idea, in a way.
Detectives had a hard time buying that, and it got even more complicated when they learned Richard had told friends something completely different, that Sarah's pregnancy was accidental. So now there were two versions. In the second one, Richard claimed Connie couldn't have another child, but she desperately wanted one. According to him, Sarah offered to carry a baby for them. The plan, he said, was that all three of them would raise the child together. You can imagine the looks in that room. After seeing the detectives' reactions, Richard adjusted his story again. This time, he admitted the pregnancy wasn't planned. It had been unexpected, and he said the affair had only lasted about a month.
Was her getting pregnant unexpected?
It was unexpected.
Richard started lying to Connie about where he was. He'd say he was working late or out with friends. Meanwhile, he was telling Sarah he loved her, promising her he was about to file for divorce, that it was happening soon. At the time Connie was killed, there were only 8 weeks left before his daughter with Sarah was due to be born. 8 weeks. And here's the part that makes it even more complicated. Richard actually took Connie on a romantic trip to Vermont. When she posted photos from the getaway on Facebook, Sarah saw them, and that's when she realized he had been lying about leaving his wife. Whether Connie ever found out about the affair or the baby isn't known for sure. Her friends don't believe she knew. They're convinced that if she had, she would have told someone close to her. She wasn't the type to carry something like that alone. Whatever the full truth was, it seemed like Richard had made a decision. In his mind, removing Connie from the picture may have looked like a way to start over, to reset his life, to fix the mess he himself had created. In June of 2015, Richard really did reach out to a divorce attorney, but no paperwork was ever filed, nothing official. Phone records later showed that 2 days before the murder, he texted Sarah and promised he was going to leave Connie. The very next day, he told Sarah he loved her and that he'd see her tomorrow. At the same time, Connie's phone captured messages from that same day, an argument between her and Richard. She accused him of lying about an account. So while he was telling one woman he was about to start a new life, at home things were clearly unraveling. "You lied to me, and I'm cleaning up your mess again. Great weekend, and Merry Christmas." "It's going to be a very Merry Christmas," Richard replied. What Connie didn't know was that Richard had been using a secret credit card. He paid for flowers for Sarah, hotels, and he spent over $1,000 at a strip club. His browser history showed searches like deadly combinations of over-the-counter drugs, quick, untraceable homemade poison, tasteless poison, easily available. And that still wasn't everything. A major piece of evidence was coming, but it took time to uncover. Christmas 2016 passed, then New Year's, then the spring of 2017. Connie had always lived an active lifestyle. She wore her Fitbit every day, and on the day she died, she was wearing it too. The data from that device told a completely different story than the one Richard described. Police already knew Richard waited more than an hour before calling 911. At first, that could have been explained away. Shock, trauma, stress. People do strange things in extreme situations. But when investigators analyzed the Fitbit data, CCTV footage, computer logs, and the home security system records, they reconstructed the real timeline of that morning. And this is what it showed. At 8:26 and 8:27 in the morning, Richard logged into Facebook from his home computer. That was the same time he claimed he was driving to work. At 8:41, there was a login to Outlook.com from his computer. Richard said that between 8:45 and 9 o'clock, he returned home, encountered the intruder, and shortly after that, Connie came back and was shot. But according to her Fitbit, at 8:46, Connie had just left for spin class. 1 minute later, at 8:47, Richard accessed the home alarm system, attempting to disarm it. At 8:50, he succeeded. 9 minutes later, he armed it again. At 8:53, he disarmed it once more, this time using a key fob. Around 8:53, Connie arrived at the gym. A few minutes later, at 9:04, she sent a Facebook message to her therapist. At that exact same time, 9:04, Richard sent an email to his supervisor. He claimed he did it from the side of the road, but the email was sent from the home IP address. At 9:08, Connie left the gym building and returned to her car. About 10 minutes later, Richard was viewing the Indian Valley YMCA website, the same place Connie had just visited. At 9:23, Connie's Fitbit recorded activity consistent with the garage door opening at home. From 9:40 to 9:46, she was active on Facebook. It appears that during that window, Richard may have been trying to figure out how to get her into the basement. At 10:05, the Fitbit recorded Connie's final movements. At 10:12, the panic alarm was triggered from Richard's key fob. The data showed Connie was alive for roughly another hour after the time Richard claimed she had been killed. Not a single part of his version matched the digital evidence. Richard never left the house. The timestamps contradicted him, and her heart rate and movement patterns showed no signs of running from an intruder.
Been arrested, charged with murdering his wife more than a year ago.
Connie DeBate, an Ellington mother of two, brutally murdered in her home 2 days before Christmas. Well, tonight, finally, a break in that case. A newly released 50-page arrest warrant revealing what was happening inside that home, inside that marriage.
Yeah, we also have this exclusive video showing Mr. DeBate being transported by state police tonight.
Richard was arrested and charged with murder, tampering with evidence, and making false statements to police. At that point, the investigation shifted. It was no longer about chasing a masked intruder. It was about the man who had claimed to survive one.
Grant says DeBate is being held under a $1 million bond and is scheduled to appear in court on Monday. State police say the investigation turned over every stone.
It's very important to follow all leads, follow all evidence, speak to all witnesses, any potential suspects. This is about the victim.
Grant says the lengthy investigation was a collaborative effort from several factions of law enforcement. She claims it was necessary to be extremely thorough during the process in order to prevent possible mistrials in the future. Community members reacting to the arrest of Rick DeBate right in their own backyard.
Anytime somebody loses their life is unfortunate, especially when it's invested.
Friday afternoon, neighbors say 40-year-old DeBate was pulling onto the family street when he was served an arrest warrant for the murder of his wife, Connie. And now community members feel justice is on the horizon.
They wouldn't bring the case up if they didn't really have a lot of evidence that it was the husband.
Evidence that took nearly a year and a half to gather. Community members say the lengthy investigation is a positive.
Nowadays, the police, they got to cross every T and dot every I before they can come after you, really, or they can blow the whole case. A good lawyer will get them off.
Fortunately, you have a murderer running around the streets if it's supposed to be him, but the good side about that means they did a thorough investigation. So hopefully, like I said, justice be served.
Still, people in town are still shaken by the crime.
It's kind of a dangerous world, rough world, dangerous country. So you got to watch your back.
Now, we reached out to DeBate's attorney tonight, and he just sent us this statement, which reads, "My client is innocent of these charges, and he looks forward to be vindicated after trial."
Richard posted bond in the amount of $1 million and was released while awaiting trial. During that time, he remained involved in raising the child he had with Sarah. Then, in 2019, the family was hit by another tragedy. Connie's father passed away. He had been seriously ill for a long time, but according to those close to him, he held on, hoping to see justice served for his daughter. Connie's brother later said his body simply gave out. He died without ever seeing her killer behind bars. The trial was originally scheduled to begin in April of 2020. A jury was selected, but then the pandemic happened, and after that, Richard's attorney died. The proceedings were delayed again. It wasn't until April of 2022, more than 6 years after Connie's murder, that the trial finally began.
A murder trial that has gained worldwide attention.
Now, cameras are not allowed in the courtroom for this trial, but we are allowed to sit in and listen. The now former detective told jurors that Richard DeBate gave law enforcement consent to search his Ellington home, his iPhone, and also allow them to swab him for DNA and gunshot residue. The state presented other evidence, including photographs of Richard DeBate's injuries while he was in his hospital bed, along with clothing, his hospital socks, and a shoe that had blood on it. DeBate's attorney had this to say outside the courtroom today.
As the trial's ongoing, we would love to make comments day to day as each piece of evidence comes in, explain our defense and explain our side. But what we need to do is respect the process here.
Now, that Fitbit that we've been talking about, that hasn't been mentioned in court just yet, but I'm sure it will be brought up. Tomorrow, though, the jury is expected to listen to the rest of that 4-hour recording. We are live from Rockville. Courtney Zeller, Channel 3 Eyewitness News.
At trial, prosecutors presented around 600 pieces of evidence and called more than 130 witnesses, including Richard himself. His defense team argued that police had operated with what they called tunnel vision. They claimed investigators decided from day one that Richard was guilty and then forced every fact to fit that conclusion. But the record showed something different. Detectives followed every version Richard gave them. They investigated the contractor angle. They looked into other potential suspects. And one by one, those possibilities were ruled out. The technological evidence, the crime scene, or really the lack of signs pointing to an outside intruder. The canine findings. The contradictions in Richard's multiple stories. And the affair taken together, all of it pointed back to one person, him. The defense focused heavily on unidentified DNA found inside the house. They argued similar unknown DNA was also detected on the rifle used to shoot Connie. They also claimed that a house cleaner had seen a dark figure near a window at the DeBate's home. Prosecutors pushed back hard. They described Richard as a ticking time bomb who had cornered himself. In their view, he killed Connie because he was afraid a divorce would destroy his reputation, that he would lose friends, that the financial consequences would be devastating. And he was also facing the possibility of losing custody of RJ and Connor. According to the state, it wasn't a break-in. It was a man trying to preserve the life he didn't want exposed.
Now, 4 weeks into the trial, one of Connie's sisters took the stand today, saying the family learned she was shot only after a family meeting was held at their parents' home, a day after she was killed. And Richard DeBate was there. She says when he arrived at the home, she heard him say, "I didn't do it. There was someone in the house. They said I need a lawyer." She also says Richard DeBate needed help getting into the house. He looked distraught, physically ill, and it appeared he had been crying. The family gathered around the kitchen table, and she told jurors Richard DeBate told them the story about what happened. He told the family he retained a lawyer, and the lawyer told him not to talk about anything, but believed he owed them an explanation. Connie's sister and her brother-in-law, who also testified today, says Richard DeBate showed no emotion when he told the story. Connie's sister says Richard DeBate mentioned a trip the family was supposed to take after the holidays, going to Great Wolf Lodge, and that he will have to find someone to go with. 7 people who live or lived in the Ellington neighborhood at the time of the crime also testified, saying they didn't see anything out of the ordinary that day.
And the judge mentioned in court today that they are hoping to conclude the state's case by the end, or by the middle, rather, of next week. There is no court tomorrow. It will pick back up on Friday.
The stand in his own defense. He admitted he was in love with both women. He said he felt trapped, overwhelmed. Yes, he confirmed the affair, but he insisted that having an affair doesn't make someone a killer. He told the jury he misses Connie every single day, that he would never do something like that to his sons. Sarah also testified She said she never intended to destroy the DeBates family. According to her, she was prepared to raise her daughter on her own. She even stated she would have left Richard's name off the birth certificate if he decided to stay with Connie. With tears in her eyes, she said she felt ashamed and heartbroken over everything that happened, but she insisted she never pressured Richard to leave his wife. And she made one thing very clear: there were never any conversations ever about harming or killing Connie. After 5 weeks of testimony, both sides rested their cases. In May of 2022, the jury returned with a verdict: guilty on all counts.
Guilty on all counts. A jury has reached a verdict in the Richard DeBate murder trial.
Mark and Aaron, a lot of surprise here at the courthouse. The jury probably deliberated for, at the most, 3 hours. Richard and Connie's families had emotional reactions as the verdict was read.
Connie was essentially sentenced to death, while this convicted murderer has been living his life while out on parole for 6.5 years. There will be no closure for the Margada family, but there is finally justice for Connie.
She was a terrific sister, mother, daughter. I loved her. I remember when she was born, I'm 10 years older. My father brought me to the hospital to see her for the first time, and the nurse held her up to the window. And that was very memorable, seeing the new baby for the first time.
Richard's defense team said they're prepared to keep fighting for their client.
They only started about 24 hours ago, and it was a 5-week trial, so I'd say we were a bit surprised. I think all three of us, very disappointed with the outcome. It's been a lot of effort, an exhaustive case, but again, we're going to have more filings. We'll say more on those. Thank you. Thank you, Trent.
First up right now at 4, we start with some breaking news this afternoon. The man convicted in the Fitbit murder trial will spend 65 years in prison. Thanks for joining us today.
Later, the judge handed down the sentence: 65 years in prison. He described the crime as brutal, calculated, incomprehensible. Richard's maximum possible release date is May of 2087. And just before deputies escorted him out of the courtroom, Richard said, "I stand before you as an innocent man. I will never stop fighting for justice for my wife, Connie. I think about her every single day." His parents still believe in his innocence. They say they simply cannot accept that 2 days before Christmas, he could have lured his wife into the basement, killed her, staged an attack, and then gone on living as if nothing had happened. Like it was just another day. In October of 2024, Richard filed an appeal of his conviction.
Defense attorney for Richard DeBate, Trent Lalima, addressing 6 justices in a room full of UConn law students, claiming the state prosecutor Matthew Gdansky engaged in a pattern of impropriety that denied DeBate a fair trial.
Perhaps some of the most damaging would be the ticking time bomb question, which was 24 hours, almost exactly 24 hours. After that, those notes had been excluded by the trial court. The state asked, "Did you feel like a ticking time bomb?" I mean, ticking time bomb makes my client out to be a dangerous person.
I don't think that there is anything improper at all about using the defendant's own words in a prior inconsistent statement to impeach his testimony once he testifies.
Isn't this supposed to be a fair trial, not a gamesmanship episode?
As of the time this story is being recorded, the decision still rests with the Connecticut Supreme Court. Connie's sister, Leslie, is now raising her boys. Because of Richard's story, the masked intruder, the break-in, the boys grew up afraid that a stranger might burst into their home, that someone could come through the door at any moment. And now, they're only beginning to understand what their father actually did to their mother. Connie's mother often thinks back to their last phone call. She remembers the very first words she heard when she picked up the phone. I love you. You're my best friend." And she says that right there, that sentence, that was Connie. Kind, loving, the type of person who made you feel seen, like you mattered. She wanted everyone around her to feel special, important, valued. Her best friend Kim said, "I miss her laugh. I miss the way she made me feel warm inside. I miss how much joy she brought into my life and into the lives of everyone around her. I miss everything, every little thing that had anything to do with her."
At 8:26 and 8:27 a.m., Richard was actually on Facebook on